Welcome, everybody. This is Adam Mahalski. I'm the Curator of Education here at the Nevada State Railroad Museum, and thank you for joining us tonight for our presentation, New Chapters Discovered in Nevada's Suffrage and Railroad History. We're doing this in collaboration with the Nevada Women's History Project, and so this is a project we've been working on for a few months now, and we've found some really interesting stories that relate to women's suffrage and railroads, because who doesn't like both of those subjects, right? So we have a presentation tonight with Mona Reno of the Nevada Women's History Project, and she will be giving her portion of the presentation. And then we also have a presentation with our Curator of History, Wendell Huffman, and he will be presenting after Mona. But first, we will start with Mona's presentation, and if you're ready, we can start.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to the Nevada State Railroad Museum for making this all happen. And thank you to Patty Bernard, who is at home recovering. As you can see on the entry slide, this was Patty's vision. She's been researching this, and she gave me a great outline. And so for months now, we have been working on this project, as Adam said. So here we go. So the first thing is, what is suffrage? We get that a lot, you know. And so this is what suffrage is. And men and women and people of all races and ethnicity have the very same word when it relates to their right to vote all over the world. That's the key term. It's been fought for many times. So our Nevada Railroad history starts with a suffrage convention in Battle Mountain. It was a brand new railroad stop in Battle Mountain for the Central Pacific Railroad. And on July 4th, which is a couple days from now, that will be 150 years since that very first women's suffrage convention. And it was, that date is still 50 years before women got the right to vote with the national amendment. So it didn't happen very quickly. Now this image you're looking at is a project that's a national project of the William Pomeroy Foundation and the National Votes for Women Trail. It's all across the United States, and they provide these markers, and we design them and research them, and these are approved for Nevada in those 5 towns. Carson is installed, Las Vegas is installed, Tonopah is installed. Battle Mountain was going to be dedicated this year, but they have put it off to next year. And Reno is still in the planning stage to produce the marker. So these are a wonderful thing, and there's a big map, and you should follow them all across the United States. So Nevada is very proud to be part of that project. That was orchestrated by Dr. Joanne Goodwin at UNLV, and the Nevada Women's History Project just helped her where we could, but all the credit goes to Dr. Joanne Goodwin at UNLV. So Nevada's women's suffrage is, we got the right to vote 6 years before the National Amendment in 1914. And we love this map. It's called the Black Spot, because all of the states around us have full suffrage, the white states, and there's Nevada. And so it was get rid of the black spot. So and we did on November the 3rd, 1914. But as part of this, we have this women's suffrage website that we got a grant from Nevada Humanities to produce. So when you are browsing and you want to know, this is the site to go. We have a very good timeline, and you just run down it, and then all these orange things are hot links, and it just tells you about Nevada suffrage. So I don't have to do that now. You can look it up. We have biographies of suffragists, and we have 60 plus of these up, of women who worked across Nevada for suffrage. So that is just something I wanted to show you. I'm going back to, I'm hoping I'm going back. There, are we back? Okay, good. So there's a thing about, are we suffragists or suffragettes? And we are suffragists because suffragettes are what they called the British women who were getting the right to vote. And they were reputably quite militant. And the United States, as a rule, was not, and the West specifically was not. So Anne Martin is the main player in Nevada suffrage. She was the president of the Nevada Equal Franchise Society. And so this is her telling us to call ourselves suffragists. So if y'all would do the same, that would be appreciated. So these are what it was like in the 20s. It was the heyday of this kind of, I don't know if it's Art Deco or Art Nouveau, but very much of the suffrage literature is in this, with this flowing woman. The colored one, that's probably Columbia, and the other one is the Statue of Justice. And she is putting 1914 on the map for Nevada. And it says 2 more bright spots because both Montana and Nevada got the vote the same year. So then the West was complete. And so then the colored one, the ladies from the East were really wanting her to come and save them. So in 2 years after we got the right to vote, all these ladies in the East were going, they were trying to get the Western suffragists to help them get the vote. There was very much cooperation between states in the West and the people running the national program in the East. And Alice Paul, it says down here, Congressional Union for Women's Suffrage chair, developed this plan for a train. And her train, you can see, it left Washington, D.C. and went to Chicago and went around and down and around and down and ended up in Reno. And then it went to Carson City down here, and then it went back to Sacramento and up to Seattle before it went back to Washington. And they called their train the Suffrage Special. And that's where the name of this project we're working on comes from, is this Suffrage Special. And they only went to the states that already had the right to vote, which is kind of interesting because they thought those ladies can help them get it. So they arrived in Reno late on April the 26th. On the 27th, they went to Carson City to see Governor Emmett Boyle, and then they came back to Reno, did a big convention at the Majestic Theater in Reno, and then they left. So they were just here a short time, but they left a big impact on Nevada. And the research for this came about because of this picture with the governor standing in front of the Capitol. On our website for a year, we've had this picture up. Can you identify these women? And nobody could. And it's because it turns out that they aren't Nevadans. And so to show you that, the other photo of the lady standing out is absolutely the suffrage train returning to Washington, D.C. And we tracked this lady. I'm hoping you can see my cursor because her hat is so distinctive. And there she is right there with the governor. And we see her in more places. And so we're extremely confident that we've nailed this, and that that picture is not the Nevada suffragists that were there in the picture you're going to see in a minute. So they went to meet Governor Boyle. And these are some of the prominent women who spoke at the Majestic Theater that night to many, many people, men and women alike. And the keynote speaker was the daughter of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And in suffrage history, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony were the first movers and shakers. And so her daughter is continuing on that tradition. Lucy Burns is also a big name in suffrage. And this Florence Hills is the lady I was just talking about. And we didn't know her name before, but we think she's quite prominent. So following their speaking, the suffrage special left Reno. So here we go, and now it's 1920, and a lot of very prominent women in Washoe County and other places in the state, but primarily Washoe County because they had access to the governor, had convinced Governor Emmett Boyle to call a special session to ratify what was called the Susan B. Anthony Amendment. We know it as the 19th Amendment, but at the time it was called the Susan B. Anthony Amendment. And so they knew that they all wanted to go down there and be a part of that very important day of ratifying the 19th Amendment to get Nevada in one of the 36 states required. 3/4 of the states have to ratify the amendment for it to go into the Constitution. So they went down there, and you see their train, they called it the Suffrage Special. And that was in honor of that other train that went all the way across the United States earlier. So they put this big banner down the sides of their train. Well, wasn't very popular with the V&T when they got to Carson City, because the banner was gone when they were done with the day, and nobody ever knew what it happened to it. We don't know what it looked like for sure. The newspaper articles call it white muslin with black letters. And so the Nevada Women's History Project has produced a 40-foot long white muslin banner with black letters that says Suffrage Special. And the Nevada State Railroad Museum is going to put it on the very identical car that they're referring to in this quote from 1920. The coach car number 17 will have the Suffrage Special on it, but I'm sure Wendell's going to talk about that. So this is just because you have to know what the words say. This whole thing is about a constitutional amendment to the United States Constitution. So here it is. And the only part that is the actual wording is this little teeny piece here in the middle. And the rest of it is what they have to do at the legislature. So the Senate was unanimous. In the Assembly vote, there was one dissenter. And his rationale was quite good. His name is Ferguson, and he was from Eureka. And he said he voted no because he only represented the people of Nevada, and he didn't think he could represent anyone else in the United States. And so he voted no so that their states could pass it like we had done earlier. But it passed, and Nevada was then the 28th state to ratify the 19th Amendment towards making it a constitutional amendment. Now, we did that on February the 7th, 1920. The last state to do it was Tennessee, and that was August the 18th. So it took another 6 months to get enough states to actually do it. So on the day of the special session, there was one woman in the Nevada legislature, and she was the first woman in the Nevada legislature. She was elected 4 years after we gained the right to vote. Her name was Sadie Dotson Hurst, and there she is. And so she was a Republican from Washoe County. And when they met, they broke protocol. Instead of the Speaker of the Assembly, they had Sadie introduce the legislation and call the vote. And so that was wonderful. And then that made her the very first woman in the United States to preside over a state legislature. So down here is a link. The Nevada Women's History Project is known for our biographies. We have a very wonderful biographies website at thisnevadawomen.org, and that's a link to Sadie's full biography. So after it was official, some of these women and men went over to the governor where he signed it. And Sadie is right behind him. And then to her right is the Speaker of the Assembly. And we know some of these women. The Nevada Women's History Project, that's how this project got started, is we were asked to find out who these women were, and if we could, write some biographies. So this picture is how this whole thing started. And here are a few of those ladies. Now, Felice Cohen, I say Sister Felice Cohen. Felice was a lawyer at the time, and she wrote the actual legislation.
Excuse me,
Mona?
Mona, your
Yes.
slide stopped
Yeah.
at the 4th special session.
I'm backing up. It stopped at that?
Yeah,
That stopped at that. Okay.
exactly.
Can you see Sadie?
No.
Oh, please restart. Unexpectedly stopped. Okay, good. Thank you for letting me know. I'm doing it again. And thank you all. You understand how this is. Is it working again? What do you see now?
People in the 1920 ratification photo.
Yay! Okay, I'm going to back up. Because there is Sadie Hurst, and she's the one who I told you about. That was the first woman and presided over the session. Thank you for letting me know. And then here is the very important picture that started all of this work, because we wanted to know if we could identify these women 100 years later. Well, we could, mostly because they were club women. They were women in the Federation of Women's Clubs, and they were in the paper, and there were lots of ways that they got their images there. Not all of them, but some of them. And the Nevada Historical Society has treasures, and so we could find out quite a bit of this. So, okay, now, so here are some of these ladies. We have suffrage biographies for each of these ladies on our websites. And so I'm not gonna, you might recognize some of these names. The reason we wanted to know who they were is because in honor of the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote, the Nevada Commission for Women arranged and orchestrated the reenactment of this photo. And so there's Governor Sisolak, and Mrs. Sisolak is right behind him. And there, the next slide is very busy and full of words, so only look at the boldface underlined ones, because that's who the people are in the picture. So this reenactment happened right before we got the pandemic, and otherwise this would never have happened. I want to point out the two women in this picture that represented the Nevada Women's History Project. We were honored to be in this photo because we had done so much historic research for them. So this, can you see my cursor? This is Patty Bernard, the current chair and the inspiration for this presentation. And this is me over here. So we were very proud of that. And so now here's the list because people want to know. See, we have former first ladies. We have Governor Bryan, Senator Bryan, Mayor of Henderson. So it was, and all of the elected women that are in the offices, controller, secretary of state. So this was really an amazing photograph. So, okay. Now, great stories take great research. So like I've been saying sort of along, we were doing this because we wanted to look for the names in that 1920 picture. And then those two photos showed up, the one with the governor on the steps and the one of him signing it. And at the Historical Society, they both have the same dates, but they have different clothes and they were different women. So then you go, okay, there's a challenge. So we knew that the ratification photo was the right one. And then when you put in Suffrage Special, because we knew the name of the train from Carson City to Reno and back was called the Suffrage Special. Well, then you run into this 1916 one, and you kind of have to, and that's led us to these other things. So we learned in this research that the V&T had to add extra cars to that train because there were so many people. The legislators were on that train, and there were about 50 of these women that wanted to come down and be a part of it. So Patty knows a railroad researcher named Dennis Beagley, and she asked him about it. And then they went to Stephen Drew, who is at the California State Railroad Museum, and he sent them up to UNR Special Collections for the train registers. So that's when we started talking to the State Railroad Museum, and both groups are very excited about this. And what we have done is created, oh, let's go back. We're going to have on August the 15th, the Suffrage Special is going to run again. I'm going past this bib. So here it is, when and where, and there's two places you can get advanced tickets online. And the first class is car number 4, and it's the first and probably only time that that car will be used. So that's a very special thing. So here's the bibliography, and I know it's little and busy. I don't expect you to pay attention to it, but later if you look at the presentation and you want to know what the sources are, these are the primary sources we use to find the information on the 2 suffrage specials. So this is me. If anybody ever wants to call me or email me, I'd be happy to reply. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
All right, thank you, Mona. We appreciate your presentation. Also, I forgot to mention that if you have any questions, there's a button at the bottom titled Chat, and you can click on it, and you can type your message in there if you have any questions. Otherwise, you can wait until the end, and then we'll have some more questions available at that. You can talk and share your questions at that time.
Okay, I'm taking down this presentation.
All right.
There we go.
Thank you.
Is it gone?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So next up is Wendell Huffman, and he's the museum's curator of history here at the museum. And so I am just gonna unmute him now. And let's see. So I'm trying to get this to work. Can you, Dan, can you unmute your
Hello.
All right, there's Wendell.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Good. Do we have pictures?
we can see you. Let's see if we can share screen. Dan,
Yeah.
can you share Wendell's screen?
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, where's your PowerPoint?
Oh, it's under shared.
Wakey, wakey, eggs and cakey.
Go to shared. I'll do this. I can probably find it easier. How do I make that full screen?
I'll show you. So it's right here.
Is this what they're seeing, or is that what they're seeing?
They're not seeing it yet. You're not seeing it yet, right?
No, we're still seeing Wendell.
Okay. How's that?
All right, it's coming up. There it is.
Which one are they seeing? This one?
They're seeing this.
They're seeing that.
That's what you're seeing. Your notes and everything. And then you.
Okay. What you're looking at is a photograph of car 17. Car 17 was a regular passenger coach on the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. For roughly 60 years, it was one of the longest cars, and I'm sure that's the reason it was used on that particular occasion. I'm always looking for stories about these cars. Passenger cars really did nothing but carry passengers back and forth between Reno and Virginia City. The one thing we knew about this car was that it had been a private car. And before I tell you that story, though, it may be interesting to you to know how we know that this is the car that was on the 1920 Suffrage special, how this is the one that had the banner on it. First place, the newspaper said the banner was 40 foot long, and there are really only a handful of cars on the railroad that were long enough to accommodate a 40-foot banner. So that narrowed it down quite a bit to start with. But really, you want to get documentation if you can. Are they seeing this?
Yeah. Did you see the?
Are you seeing a picture of the cars, or are you seeing paper?
Yeah, you can see the picture of the car and the next slide.
Well, I want to see the paper.
Click the next slide.
Adam,
Hold on. I'm gonna go look. What are you seeing?
you see this or this?
No, I see. Oh, let's go to. Is that the screen you want?
That's the screen I want. Yep.
Okay.
What you're looking at
You
is a train register. This sheet of paper is about 2 feet wide and maybe 18 inches tall. And the railroad kept this kind of documentation on all their trains. And basically what this is showing you is the different trains that were run each day and the crew that was on that train and the times that they got to these various stations. But what you're wanting to look at is down here, and the next slide, if this works, is going to be that close-up. How do I get there?
Let me try. We're still dealing with the
Okay,
where'd you go? How'd you get that other side?
we go to PowerPoint.
Click on that.
I was going to say click on that. Let's go to the top one. Go to slideshow.
Right.
Slideshow. From beginning. That's what we want. So maybe it's on that screen.
Not here. Is that the detail?
That's what we want.
Can you see that? Do you see the remarks?
What you're looking at here, this says engine 25 instead of number 11 on train 1 from Carson. So they've changed the locomotive so that it's a heavier locomotive going north to Reno on Friday night. And number 1 also picks up 2 cars, 2 coaches in Carson. There's number 4 and number 17. The 17 is back behind Mona.
Try that.
This one?
Yeah.
No. So the next slide is for Saturday. And this is the day of the train that's the Suffrage special. And notice originally they had written 2 extra coaches. They had taken car 4 and car 17 down there. But in fact, when they actually started counting bodies, they only needed car 17. And so they didn't take car 4. And the reason we know that 17 is the one is because it was the one that had the 40-foot banner. It was, of the 2 cars, it's the only one that would carry a 40-foot banner. This is the very beginning of the newspaper, of one of the newspaper articles that talks about the banner being taken off the car when it got to Carson City. So anyway, here's our coach, Coach 17, that was on the V&T. They used it for various occasions for 60 years. But before it was a coach, what we did know about it was it had been a private car. This is a floor plan of it. It was built in 1868 by the Central Pacific in Sacramento. And it was a private car. And by that, it rather than being a regular coach that passengers would ride in, it was for the highfalutin people that had a bedroom, there was a parlor, a dining room, a kitchen. There was generally a steward. When the Central Pacific built it, Charlie Crocker is the one that wanted the thing built, and he wanted to take this back to New York when the railroad was completed to show them what they could do in California. In fact, that did not happen, but they used it on the railroad whenever he would make inspection trips. The federal government had inspectors, and once you were east of Reno, there are very few places that had a hotel that you could stay in. And so rather than camping, you had this RV on wheels. This is a photograph from 1869, very early in the year. This is the first photograph we have of the car, and that's this car back here. It had its own, they called it a subsistence car. This is what they carried their supplies in, because they were basically roughing it when they were out in the middle of Nevada. The thing that made this car very famous in May of 1869, when Leland Stanford went back to Promontory for the driving of the Gold Spike, this is the car he rode in, because this was the car with the bedroom. He and half a dozen of his closest friends and the spikes, there were 3 gold spikes and 1 silver spike from Nevada, and they all rode in this car This is at Monument Point at the north end of Salt Lake, and they're on their way to Promontory for the driving of the Gold Spike. This is a picture after the Gold Spike ceremony. The two locomotives are still facing each other. The people generally are in their various private cars on the Union Pacific Railroad, or back here in car 17, or the Central Pacific's private car. It wasn't car 17 yet. This is a great picture because this is the picture that actually places our car at Promontory on that occasion. Following this event, Charlie Crocker and his brother used it as a private car. As far as we know, Charlie Crocker never had it farther east than Chicago. But we think his brother, E.B. Crocker, took it all the way to New York. This is a picture taken in Reno in 1872. It's tacked onto the tail end of the regular train. It still has its subsistence car. And this is the car that became car 17 on the V&T. In 1875, the Central Pacific sold it. It became the property of their attorney, Alfred Cohen. He and his buddy D.O. Mills, who you've probably have heard of, Mills Park is named after D.O. Mills. They used it occasionally going coast to coast. And then in 1876, it was sold to the V&T. Mills was very much involved with the V&T, and he was a good friend of William Sharon. William Sharon had been president of the railroad. He was elected to the US Senate and knew that he'd be making several trips across the country, and he wanted a private car. So the V&T bought the car, and it became a private car that Sharon used, and a few others. John Mackey used it to go to the World's Fair, or to the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia in 1876. And that was about the end of its story as a private car. The car wasn't even 10 years old yet. The railroad technology had changed. New private cars like this one that was built for D.O. Mills had 6-wheel trucks rather than the 4-wheel trucks. They were smoother. They were 10 to 20 feet longer. Instead of having just one bedroom, they had several bedrooms, a bigger dining room because they had more people. And if you're rich enough to have a private car, and believe me, William Sharon was rich enough to have a private car, you didn't want a second-rate car. And the car that the V&T had was really a second-rate car. And so they took it into the shop in Carson City and converted it into a coach. This is the interior of the coach. The railroad numbered it number 17, and that is what it was known as for the next 60-odd years. This is the earliest photograph of it on the V&T. It's this last car on this train going across the Crown Point Trestle, about 1890. And this is probably the last picture of it on the V&T. This is a picture of it at the end of a rail fan trip in 1938. This is going through Washoe Valley. This is Slide Mountain. It's on its way back north. At the end of the year, at the end of 1938, 20th Century Fox came looking for a railroad car. Paramount Studios had already bought most of the cars that were available. They leased, 20th Century Fox leased this car and then wrote a letter to the railroad saying, sorry, we destroyed it by accident. What do we owe you for it? And so they paid him for the car. The ironic thing is 20th Century Fox actually ended up paying more for the car than Paramount did for any of the cars that they bought. This is a picture of the car as it was dressed up by 20th Century Fox for a movie called Centennial Summer. The ironic thing about that is that was a movie about the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition. And this car was actually at the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition. I am very confident that there's no one that was involved with that movie that knew it. And in fact, the car basically is eliminated from the movie on the cutting room floor. It only shows up in a distant scene at one time. 20th Century Fox really didn't use it very much. It stayed out on their ranch in Malibu Canyon, right around the corner from where they filmed MASH. It was used in the movie Kenny Rogers as the gambler, and that's probably what saved the car, because they spent a lot of money putting the car back in pretty good condition for that filming. So kudos to Kenny Rogers for what he did. The car was later used in Pale Rider. And this is the lettering that it has in Pale Rider. That was the last movie that it was ever in. It came back to Carson City about 1980 to the Railroad Museum, 1988, I'm sorry. And it was a big car. We didn't know what to do with it. And so it stayed in the back of the building. It had a massive sag in the middle of it, which you can sort of see from this photograph. The one platform had already fallen off one end. This one was on the verge of falling off. Windows were broken. And that's the way the car sat. But as you may well know, a year or 2 years ago, last year, we came up to the 150th anniversary of the driving of the Gold Spike. And since this car was actually at Promontory for that event, we wanted to put that on exhibit, which, and this actually goes back 2 or 3 years before that, as we're approaching that anniversary. The question is, what are we going to do with this car? The problem is there's so much history to this car itself. The car was brand new in 1868, yet there's very little that you see that was there at the time. It was recited in 1912. The windows were changed in the 1880s, just a whole bunch of different things. One of the things that the car has, there's all these holes on the side of it where the woodpeckers in Malibu Canyon used it to store acorns. And the kids love this car, and they call it the acorn car for good reason. As we started tearing it apart, we found it had a very interesting framework inside the wall. This is actually very archaic, and it was actually obsolete at the time the car was built. And I think this explains why the Central Pacific got rid of the car so soon, is once the Transcontinental Railroad is completed and your building department people begin to go to national conventions, they find out there are better ways to do things. And the problem was, if we were going to restore this car to the way it looked in 1869, we wouldn't rebuild it this way because we wouldn't want our work to fall apart. But you can see where this timber is compressed, and this explains why there was such a sag in the car. On the inside of the roof, there's a tremendous amount of information. It's behind Mona's picture, but over here there's a hole from one of the original roof lights. Originally it had these rods across. There's another hole right there where there was a rod across. Because those rods had been, because the rods looked old-fashioned, and so the V&T took the rods out at some point in time to make the car look modern, and they put these iron carlins in like this. And in the process of doing that, they cut these longitudinal pieces. The roof had begun to collapse. The roof, the top of the car was 4 inches wider than the bottom because the roof was beginning to cave in on itself. Had this been outside and had snow on it, the car probably would have collapsed several years ago. Ultimately, we made the decision that we were not going to restore the car. We were going to preserve it. There was just so little information about what that car looked like on the inside that anything we did would have been a guess. We took the sag out of it. We leveled the car. We left the woodpecker holes in it. We built new platforms so that we had a place to attach the handrails and the hardware that otherwise would have gotten lost. It's still lettered the way it was in Pale Rider. And we put it into the front building. We left it exposed so you can see this interesting truss work inside. I've shared this the story of this car with a fellow named Jack White, that was the former curator of the Smithsonian, who wrote a book about the American Railroad passenger cars. And his response was, gee, I wish I would have known about that car when I wrote the book 20 years ago, because this would have been a featured piece of that. Anyway, when Mona and the ladies from the Nevada Women's History Project came to us and told us the story of the banner, that gave us a story at the end of this car's life, or while it was on the V&T, something to balance the story of it being a private car on the Central Pacific. This was a story of it on the Virginia Truckee Railroad and a place in Nevada history. So the first thing that I did, just being the curious guy that I am, I went to look at the car and see if we could find any nail holes. The newspaper article made the point that the railroad was very unhappy because this banner had been nailed to the side of the car, and that was private property, and the women had no right to do that. And I do not know that this is one of the nail holes, but I think it is. There is a row of holes that are otherwise without explanation on one side of the car, and there's only reference to one banner. So I think there was a banner on just the one side, and they stretched the length of the car. I've stuck the paper clip into the hole to make it more obvious of what it is. But, and this is a picture of the car as it is today with the banner on the side of it. There you go, Mona. This is the first time you get to see it. We have not nailed the banner to the car. We have tied it to the car. And we're very happy to have it. And I hope to have it up here for a while, because this is a very significant connection between our artifact, between the railroad car and the 20th Amendment 100 years ago. So here you've got the 150th anniversary of the gold spike, or the silver spike, as I like to say for Nevada spike, 150 years ago last year, and this year the 100th anniversary of the 20th Amendment. And Mona, I'm really pleased to have learned about the convention in Battle Mountain. I can't imagine a worse place to have a convention, but what the hell, it is Nevada. And I presume, and it was sort of in the center of the state, and thanks to the railroad, you could get there. And the railroad was a tremendously significant thing for the state. I like to point out that the railroad, the train on the state seal is the Transcontinental Railroad, because that's what put Nevada on the map. That's what connected it to the rest of the country. So anyway, that's my presentation. And if there's a way to do questions or answers, I'll deal with that. Thank you, Mona, for clapping. Let me know that at least you could hear this.
Thank you for the presentation, Wendell. And if anybody has any questions, you can either type them in the chat box at the bottom of the screen, or you can unmute yourself and you can ask questions that way. Are there any questions?
Well, I've got a question, Wendell.
Yes,
For
Gwen.
Wendell.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, this is Gwen.
Hi.
Yeah, I was curious about what sort of, and this is a question I guess for Mona too, like what sort of response might there have been from the public, you might have talked about that a little bit, but to the suffrage special? Like, did it seem as if people were positive about it? I mean, I'm thinking about our times right now, how it's so polarized. Did you get the sense that it was super polarized then, or what kind of response might there have been to this train car and for that purpose of the suffrage?
You want me to take that one?
Go for it, Mona. Yeah.
All we can base it on is the articles we've found in the Carson and the Reno newspapers. And the Carson newspaper, the Daily Appeal, is very conservative, and there was a follow-up article um, about, the vandalism. And in the 1916 one, the Carson Appeal had an article about what a waste of time that Eastern ladies' trip was, because Nevada wasn't going to deal with that, But the Reno papers were all very, they had many articles before the train left in 1920 saying that it was going to happen. And they were all positive. But almost all those women and the state headquarters for the Nevada Equal Franchise had been in Reno. So that Reno paper was more progressive. So it went both ways. What we found was there were a lot more articles in Reno than there were in Carson. But the Carson paper was also in favor of passing the ratification resolution. So the whole concept was positive, but none of them actually referred to the banner itself, other than where did it go and why did they vandalize the brand new car? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Can I add something? Can we still hear?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just by accident the other day, yesterday, I ran across a biography of Boyle, the governor. He was Nevada's youngest governor, and he was the owner of the Nevada State Journal, which I found very interesting. And so it reflects the fact that he's talking about it in the paper. Whether he still owned it at the time he was governor, I don't know. But I thought that was an interesting connection.
We have a question from Michelle Gardner, and it says, is this train going to be running on August 15th? This is not the train that'll be running, Coach 17, because it's too fragile to be moved very often, and we can't put it in a train consist. But it will be on display outside. It'll be on display inside the museum. The train that will be running, the car that will be running is Coach 4, which is a restored car from the 1870s. And it's a really beautiful car, and it's a really unique opportunity to ride a piece of Nevada history that we usually don't take out very often. So you get to ride in a really beautiful car that day.
But Adam, you were also running the original engine, right? Engine 25.
Yeah.
We will have engine 25 running that day. Yes.
Coach 4 was the car that was taken to Reno with 17 to be on that train. But when it came down to it, they didn't use Coach 4 on that train. The car in that train the other car was 3 and 18. Ironically, all the cars still exist. But anyway, Coach 4 is the one that's going to be running in August.
Let me just say, I think we're all really pleased about this idea of the coach running in August. That's fantastic for everyone to be able to take part in this. So thank you to all you people who organized that. Good job.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's been a fun process to be able to do this. So we're excited to be able to collaborate with the Nevada Women's History Project on this this special train ride.
Good.
Are there any other questions? I guess
So, wait a minute, I have a question.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So the last time that car ran was when?
Car 17 was last, I can't really tell you that. It was used in Pale Rider, which is 81, 82, thereabouts. And I've
It's
seen the
very
movie.
boring, Clint
It
Eastwood.
actually rolls. It's never, other than being moved from one place to another on the property, I don't think it's been used in a train since. The car is in such bad condition. The wheels, the trucks don't swivel. When we used it, we derailed it just because the wheels wouldn't swivel. I'm sure the brakes don't work. And there's no seats in it. So
that's not the car that went to Reno on the last ride of the V&T.
no, it was that, there was that picture that was where it was on the tail end of the train. That's 1938. And that was the last time it was used on the V&T. About a month later, it went to Hollywood on its own wheels, and it's been used a time or two in movies. But
Got it.
no, it hasn't been used up here since 38.
All right, any other questions?
Looks
I
like
have a
Jerry.
question. Yeah, I have a question.
Right.
Is there any place that this wonderful history that you've given us tonight is written down? I mean,
We wrote a book. It's like a 48-page booklet about Car 17. Unfortunately, that was written before we knew about its role in the suffrage special. There's another chapter that needs to be added if there's ever a second edition to that book. But the early history of the book, the restoration of the car, that is documented, yes.
okay, I
So-
see that.
Mona, did you say that you have this written up for the website?
No,
What you,
no, it's not written down anywhere. But this is the first time that we've actually put it all in the same place. It's been little bits and pieces.
Okay.
And so, no, but that may happen.
well, we all hope it will happen, that you'll get, because you've got all those great photos and you've already done all your research, Mona.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. We'll put
So
it
now
on.
all we have to do is write it up.
Yep,
All you got to do.
that's it.
Or maybe we should video record you just giving a presentation with the photos. Maybe that would be easier, but at least you could get it up faster.
Presentation today with Wendell is being recorded and will be on YouTube.
Yes.
Oh, really? You know, Lynn Bremer wanted to see this.
Yes, well,
Yes.
it's being recorded. The Railroad Museum is recording it, and they will make it available at a later date.
Yes. Yeah. So we are recording it now, and I'm going to try to figure out how to put it online so that everybody can watch it. But yeah, because Lynn Bremer did contact me earlier today and asked if it would be available, because she said she was on another Zoom presentation. I think there was one with harps tonight that
Yeah.
I wanted to watch too. But yeah, I will try to record. Well, it's recording now, and so we'll try to put this online sometime in the next week or two.
Great, good.
I just wanted
If
to thank you
look
both.
at
The
chat,
presentation
it
was
says
great.
Patty has noted that the history is in the December 2019 issue of the newsletter.
I did read that newsletter.
That is true. The Nevada Women's History Project newsletter had a 3-page article about this in there.
And Mona and Marcia and Patty, did you know about the PBS special coming on July 6th at 9 p.m.? The American Experience, The Vote. I don't know if
Is
you
that
can
the
see
one that, is that the one that Sue talked about, Davis?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Well, I think we're done.
All right,
Thank you,
thank
Mona.
you for doing this. I
Okay.
have just really enjoyed this.
Okay.
So
Bye-bye,
Terry,
all.
was nice to see you,
It was
Jerry.
nice to be here. Thank you for doing this.
I'd like to say thank you to our presenters, Mona and Wendell, for doing this tonight. Thank you for being here. And also, I wanted to mention too, for our special train on the 15th, we are planning on trying to have an all-female crew for this train ride. So they would be the ones operating the train, being the conductor, brakeman, fireman, engineer, firewoman, brakewoman. So we are planning on trying to have an all-female crew for these trains, so that if you're interested in seeing that, that'd be pretty cool experience. We haven't really done that ever before. So so this is the end of the presentation. So thank you, Mona and Wendell, for being here tonight. And thank you to Rebecca Bevins, Dr. Rebecca Bevins, for helping us to put this all together. She's the one that was able to let us use her Zoom account so that we could actually do this. So thank you, everybody, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Right.